Welcome to the True Story London podcast. I'm Michelle Toth. In this podcast, we listen to a true personal story told live at one of our shows in London, followed by a conversation with the storyteller about their background, process, story themes, and more. Today's storyteller is Jess Kasriel, sharing her story of attending the prestigious Bath Academy at age 14 while being ranked number 2 in the UK for tennis. In our discussion afterward, we talk about the unfair pressure and outdated attitudes to health and nutrition that she faced as a teenager in elite sports and the important role her family has played in her life. We also talk about how the events of the story have influenced her work today. But first, let's listen to Jess's story recorded live in London.
I'm 14 years old and I'm standing with my mum at the front of the gates of Bath Academy. This isn't just a new chapter. This is a seismic shift in my life. Since the age of 10, I've been ranked number 2 in the UK for tennis. Winning Wimbledon was always my dream, and sport means everything to me, so I can hardly contain the excitement. But as my mum gives me the final hug and I watch her car pull away, I start to feel alone, teary, and anxious. Every day at Bath Academy is the same. We have breakfast, which is muesli and fruit at 7, then chapel at 8, then 4 hours of school, then a buffet-style lunch, then 4 hours of tennis and circuit training, track training, ice baths, then 2 hours of supervised study time in the evening. And dinner, well, it's always the worst of the leftovers, dried up cottage pie and brown salad leaves. I never had trouble making friends before, but the cliques here want no new members. And as I pass them in the hallway, I get this bitchy side eye, and there's no space on the lunch tables, so I sit solo, reading letters from my best friend at home. One evening, our house parents call an urgent meeting, and our house mother looks really concerned, and she says, "Girls, not only is there sick in the toilets and the showers, it's now behind the radiators. Can the person who's making themselves sick come forward?" Come to think about it, I've always noticed this strong, pungent acid smell coming from the toilets and bits of food floating around. I hadn't really given it that much thought, but now it's behind the radiators and it's literally emitting this warm, sick aroma throughout the house. What kind of messed up person would do that? No one comes forward, and the routine continues. Our coaches schedule hours of grueling drills, competitive match play, and bleep tests, and 6-mile races. The support is minimal and the pressure is plentiful. Every day is a mirror of the one before, a relentless pursuit of our limits and of perfection. And we push ourselves to the point where a girl starts retching on the side of the court. On this particular day, I have a free period, and instead of going to the library like I should, I wander up to the boarding house. And I go into the kitchen and I spot the ever-present supply of white Hovis and peanut butter. At home, with 3 brothers, there was never enough bread. So I start slathering on peanut butter, slice after slice, and I eat mindlessly. I go to my room and I fall asleep. I wake up to 20 missed calls from the academy. I panic and I look in the mirror and I see peanut butter smears on my face and Snacker Jack crumbs on my jumper. The shame envelops me and I feel heavy in my mind and my body. I don't know what to do. And then a little voice perks up and says, "Oh, Jess, you could just tell them you're feeling unwell." I've never fibbed to miss training before, but today I can't face it. So I lie. One day at the academy, I get breaded fish, potatoes, and broccoli for lunch, and I feel quite smug and proud about this healthy choice. And then the head coach pulls me into his office, and he seems quite angry. And he says, "Jess, you're not eating healthy enough. You're gaining weight, and we're going to have to start weighing you each week." Oh, I feel so ashamed and embarrassed. All of that mindless eating. How could I let my body get so big? I start dieting the next day. At 16 years old, I'm awarded a place at Queen's Academy in London. This is it. No more school, no more chapel. We are full-time tennis players with a full-on schedule. We start in Southeast Asia, and then we have 8 weeks in South America with a different country each week. I lose the first 3 matches in a row, and after the 4th loss, the tour coach pulls me to the side, out of earshot, and he says, "Jess, you really should consider giving up, because you're never going to make it." I wonder if he's right. But instead, I try harder. When we were told not to eat carbs and go on extra runs, I did it. I showed up to everything that year. The tournaments, the fitness blocks, the dieting. And finally, it started to pay off as I reached the quarterfinals of nationals a year early. And after the match, the head of Queen's sits me and my mum down, and he turns to my mum and he says, "Unfortunately, we're going to have to let Jess go because she's not performing quite up to the standards we want, but also we're really concerned about how much weight she's lost." This is the first time I've heard about them being concerned about my weight loss. But instead, I feel ashamed and embarrassed. How could I let my body get so thin? So I leave Queen's, but I continue independently. My passion for tennis is still there, and I win a few international tournaments in a row. My confidence is rising, and my success is finally realised as I'm given a wild card for the pre-qualifying for Wimbledon. The first match is scheduled on my 18th birthday. I'm a lot thinner now, and I hear from peers that people are talking about my weight. I should be excited for the match, but I'm not. My mind is elsewhere, and I lose in straight sets. My coach is disappointed, and he implies that my passion for tennis is dwindling. Maybe he's right. I take myself off to sit in an open field to cry, and then I see in the distance my family waving at me. I'm so happy. I can't believe it. They've come to surprise me for my 18th birthday. And they take me out to a Greek restaurant where I feast to the point where I'm uncomfortably full. And they give me grandma's chocolate cake to take home. And as I wave goodbye, I start to feel the loneliness and sadness seep in. Oh, it's too much to feel. So I turn to the cake for comfort. I eat it all. I feel so guilty, heavy, and ashamed. What do I do now? Then this little voice pops up in my head and says, "Wow, Jess, you could make yourself sick. You're going to feel a lot better." Genius. It took 7 grueling years of full-on bulimia before I was ready to really look at why I developed an eating disorder. With help, I saw that it was years of repressed anger, trauma, shame, not believing in myself, not trusting myself, giving my power away, being told that I'm not good enough, all contributed. And I soon realized it's not really about the food or the body. You might think an experience like this would leave me feeling regrets, but I have no regrets. Instead, I'm so grateful for what tennis has given me, including most of my friends and a free academic and sports scholarship in a top university in America, plus a sense of determination, discipline, and strong work ethic. I'm a more empathic and stronger person today, and I listen to myself over what anyone else says. My own healing journey has led me to a career as a health and fertility coach, supporting those to maximize their physical, mental, and emotional well-being. And while my dream of winning Wimbledon may not have been realized, I have played and won many times at Wimbledon before with a circle of dear friends for fun.
Jess, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
How does it sound hearing your story back?
I did get emotional, but it was such a process to write the story and go through that again. And I've done a lot of work on myself, obviously, to get to that point. But it's funny how it can still hit a nerve.
Well, I was thinking about so many things listening back to your story. There's so much of your experience that's captured in 8 minutes. Therefore, there's so much to unpack and spend time on. When you experience like emotion hearing your story back, what are the parts that really touch you again?
I think the pre-qualifying for Wimbledon, and when I was sort of sitting in the field crying, it was really like I felt so lost and I really didn't know where tennis was in my life anymore. And then my family turned up, and just that total surprise when I, sort of almost that contrast of feeling so alone, so lost, and then actually seeing that comfort of my family being there.
And then the slight complication of the food that sort of is so connected to the experience of home, the experience of family. And I think for myself, I just can relate to so many parts of this story where the emotion of love and belonging gets mixed up with the expression of that love through food. Yeah. Grandma's chocolate cake in my family is huge, right? And it's like, it just takes on a whole other meaning. Yeah. And it really did in this story too.
Yeah. And, my grandma, when I was living at home, she would bake cakes every week, and it would be a thing, it would be a new cake each week that she'd bring round. And in the end, my dad was like, you've got to stop baking all these cakes because we do just keep eating them all. And chocolate cake was definitely like a special one. It was my brother's favourite as well. And, whenever he came home from boarding school, it was always that we had grandma's chocolate cake. So it was,
It's tricky when you're talking about eating disorders and the presence of food because we obviously have to eat.
Yes.
So I hope we'll get into this, especially because you have this expertise now being a health coach. Yeah. But thinking about your story, even though the story's context is grand, like elite athletics, the themes are so relatable. Loneliness and belonging and believing in yourself and managing the kinds of stress that can show up in any life.
Yeah. And that's it. Yes, I did have not so great experiences in tennis and with the certain coaches, but obviously you don't need to be in sports or anything to obviously develop eating disorder or have those struggles. It's
or to have a bad interaction with an adult who has power when you're young, who intentionally or unintentionally misuses that power. Because that was a really maddening part of this story, the role that the adults played. Like, what sense do you make of it now, looking back?
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because actually writing the story, there's definitely a lot of the story that I haven't talked openly about, even in therapy. And it's so interesting because I really was having all these memories coming together to make the story. The reason I'm so emotional is because I really didn't realize the impact, and I've never really properly thought about, especially a couple of coaches in mind, what they did say and how they did handle it. I'm hoping that today it's different. Mental health is very much a big topic today, and different sports systems are more aware of it, but it definitely wasn't so then.
Yeah. And do you think that the behavior from the adults was rooted more in ignorance, or just as an example, like the way that you were treated for making certain food choices when in fact the academy was responsible for providing the food? So this is hard to reconcile, that a teenager is being held to account for these types of choices when the environment is completely set by these same adults that are criticizing you.
Yeah, exactly. I do think it was ignorance for this particular coach. I think I would guess that he was just thinking, well, no, you've just got to eat a certain way. And he probably was seeing me that I was gaining weight. And so that for him, the solution was, well, no, you've just got to diet. You've got to eat very differently. But again, it wasn't guided from them or a professional in the system. It was, okay, mum, handle it. Mum, help me find a diet too. So it just wasn't handled well. Yeah.
One of the things that really stands out is how this sense of isolation or being lonely or not belonging was such a factor at different points in the story. You're number 2 since age of 10. This cracks me up that you're number 2 instead of number 1.
I know. It was obviously, it just really stayed with me because it was Maddie Brooks who was number 1. Shout out to Maddie Brooks. But yeah, she was very skillful tennis player, and I was quite a powerful one, sort of more hard-hitting, big serve, things like that. And I remember the coach who we used to travel with, Olga, she would always be like, but Jess, be like Maddie. Look how Maddie did this. And so it was always a thing.
Was it a source of motivation to be number 2, knowing that there was a slot above you? Was it comfortable to be not number 1? I'm just curious about what elite athletics are like, having never been anywhere close to it.
It's funny. It's interesting. I think it definitely was a huge driving factor for me, and actually having Maddie as number 1. And I remember the day I actually beat her, for me, it was huge. So yes, it was. I think it helped me to stay really competitive. Sure. And I think, I wonder how I'd have handled being number 1. I'd probably it would have been a lot more pressure. So,
even more stressful.
I think so. So maybe I was quite happy, to be honest.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And was your family like just totally behind you, your biggest cheerleader kind of situation?
Yeah, my mum especially, you know, she was really passionate about it. She travelled with me with most places at tournaments every weekend, and she would pick me up from school and take me to the trainings and things. And, you know, she had the most passion for it in my family.
And is she athletic?
Growing up, she was actually a very good ballet dancer. So that was sort of a big part of her growing up. But otherwise, she doesn't play tennis or much now. But
just curious, how did you find tennis in particular?
Actually, my family are quite sporty. So my eldest brother, he was a really good basketball player. So he played for England. And then my middle brother, Sam.
One of those families.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess so. And I think it was just seeing them playing the sports, and we were traveling to all the different tennis tournaments watching Sam play because he was very good. So I'm a twin. So it would be Joe and I going with my dad to tournaments, and we would just be playing with my dad actually while Sam was playing his matches. So I think it was just being constantly around it. And then once I started having lessons with Gary, who was my first coach, he was like, wow, you know, Jess has really got something. I think let's continue.
And the price that you needed to pay, like not being in your normal school environment, that started to like show up as a factor for you really pretty early upon arriving at Bath Academy.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have predicted it. I was very excited. You know, as I said in the start of the story, I was actually really looking forward to this new chapter in my life. And I didn't realize how much actually I connected to my home school and how actually I had strong friendships there, but actually still have that friendship group now. Yeah, it was a big factor. And I think also just living at home and having, you know, all my personal fitness, personal coaching, I think was huge looking back. Yeah.
Sure. And this moment in the story where the headmistress calls everyone together and describes the scenario, what's going on with people making themselves sick, I was so struck by the treatment of it as come forward. Like it was about reveal yourself for your crime or your misbehavior, as opposed to someone's in trouble. They might need support, but you said right in the story, like support was minimal and the pressure was really maximal.
Yes, no, again, at the time I didn't give it much thought, but actually, yeah, it's totally the wrong approach because there's so much shame around having an eating disorder. And of course, no one is going to come forward and say, that's me. You know, I remember the feeling in that room and it was just very like punishing, like, you know, you're really disrupting the house and this isn't okay.
But that attitude pervades the whole story. Like everything that comes up that's interfering with your top performance is either directly blamed on you or you take responsibility for it.
Yes.
As though you're not in a system that's absolutely creating the conditions where this is happening. So as a listener, it's maddening.
Yeah, it is. You know, even thinking again how the head coach of Queen's, how he dealt with letting me go, but also then adding in, you know, we're concerned about her weight loss. There you go. Deal with that.
And we're concerned about her weight loss interfering with her tennis seems more important than we're concerned about her health.
Yeah. Again, I really put it down to ignorance at the time.
I think that's appropriate, right? Like that we can recognize that we've learned a lot in the time since the events of the story about the relationship between mental health and disordered eating and things like that. So I do understand that that is part of it, is that there was genuine ignorance, there was a lack of understanding. But just as a listener, I just wanted to hug you, hug little Jess.
Yeah, I definitely, you know, I have a lot of compassion for myself looking back and seeing that I didn't need to take on what I did take on, and that actually there's a lot of reason that I was really lost and suffering. And, you know, obviously at the time I took it on that what's wrong with me? Why can't I just eat normally? Why can't I just enjoy tennis? It was just a lot of self-blame.
And the couple of times where you are reflecting on your body and like, how did I let my body get so big? And how did I let my body get so thin? That was a very like affecting, moving part of your story too. The inherent criticism of yourself and the disconnection.
Yeah. I mean, that part from a young age that was there, the inadequacy, and I was quite body aware. You know, I started puberty really quite young. I was actually the tallest in my school when I was in junior school, but I felt quite awkward about that, you know, because I was quite different. Also, I have PCOS, and with that, I had a lot of hair on my legs and things that I was just always quite conscious and didn't really quite like it. I wanted to change it.
So PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. when you're growing up ashamed of your body and like what's going on here and just feeling all the feelings that you describe in your story and now, but it's the privacy of your own home or the privacy of your own family versus in an academy where you're an object and a talent that's to be managed. It really raises the stakes and adds so much complexity to that sort of normal, painful journey that we all go through as young people.
Yeah. And I had no idea of feelings at that point. You know, when I went to boarding school, I went to the tennis academy. That was the thing, was that actually I remember, and I really think I was depressed at times. They had Saturday morning school and chapel. And I was like, oh, this is the last thing I want to be doing on my Saturday. But, you know, I just remember sort of trying to lie in and miss it. And I actually think it was sort of feeling really low. And
oh, sure.
Yeah.
And Jess, did you end up meeting anyone, like any friends at Bath Academy?
I had a couple of friends that I did connect with, but yeah, it wasn't the same as my home friends. I felt like an outsider because they obviously had a few years of forming friendships. And so then I come in, and also I'm part of the tennis academy. So I'm sort of half in, half out as well. You're at the boarding school for half the day, really. But then the other half of the day, you're at the tennis academy. So maybe when they're hanging out a bit more and they're doing sports and maybe a bit more social time, that's when I'm off playing tennis anyway. It was missing a lot of where I could have perhaps formed some friends. I didn't feel very welcome in the friendship groups.
I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts now looking back on how young people can navigate this very predictable, hard time. I don't have kids, so I don't know what's happening for kids today, but I have to imagine it's really challenging. You have children.
I have a 2-year-old, actually. Yeah.
Oh, 2-year-old.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, your little 2-year-old is not confronting these issues just yet.
Although she has very big emotions right now.
Oh, yeah.
The terrible twos. So yeah, I don't have the real experience of that, but I do work in eating disorders and disordered eating, and I work with a lot of adolescents, and I have worked as young as 9-year-olds with eating disorders. So yeah, really, in my experience of that, it's getting help. It's having some nutritional support from an expert who is specialist in eating disorders, and also the therapy work to help manage with the feelings, because really that's what it is underneath, is that we don't want to be feeling our feelings, these uncomfortable feelings. And so food becomes that numbing aspect of it.
Yeah, you say that so well in the story when you talk about the chocolate cake, like, all these feelings are coming up. I know what to do.
Yes.
Yeah. And so is that the key, teaching people the relationship between not wanting to feel a negative emotion and looking for some sort of distraction or some sort of numbing?
It is. I think that's part of it. I think also it can be, especially when it's young, a part of family system as well. So the family dynamics, usually at that age, it's family work too. Also, the nutrition plays a huge part, because if there is binging going on and things like that, it's actually helping manage that, because the temptation is to restrict. When you binge, you feel awful about yourself and you want to try and compensate for that in some way. And so actually educating on that's not the way, actually it's regular eating and whole foods and things, but the whole balance of everything as well. But yeah, often I don't think it's taught really at schools. I think it's getting there, but...
Well, even just the whole topic of emotions and emotional intelligence being part of school curriculums is relatively new.
Yeah.
But that ability of a young person to recognize an emotion and deal with it either cognitively or in some other way other than the types of distraction or numbing that you're describing.
Yeah.
When you, in your story, you make some really good style choices about how to convey all this information. And there's a lot of summarizing what has happened. So for example, you take us from realizing that first decision around to make yourself sick leads to 7 years of full on bulimia. But you opt not to take us into or relive that experience of bulimia. Was that a choice? Like, you wouldn't have had time to go into that detail of the story,
right.
But I imagine it's also just painful.
Oh, yeah, because it's, like anything, it was up and down. There were highs and lows in that period. So it wasn't all like every single day I was binging and making myself sick. But there were then the most painful times. And especially when I hit my rock bottom, when tennis ended, when the university stopped. And so I came back home and it was just really, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, where I'm going.
So you're at Rice University in Houston.
Yeah.
It sounds like you had a good experience there academically and sports.
I actually, for the most part, I was there a couple of years, was really pretty good. And I made really good friends. The tennis team were my best friends and they're from all over the world and we have regular reunions. So it was really a special time. And it's the best thing I've chosen to do in my life. It really was, because it also the team aspect. So I actually began to enjoy tennis again. I wasn't alone alone with it. But actually it was a new tennis coach who came onto the team the second semester who called me up in that summer and said, Jess, I know what's going on for you and I'd really like to help. And it was the first person I realised on reflection that actually called out, I can see that you're struggling. And she was like, we'll make it work. And it was the first time I started having therapy at the university. And so she'd let me miss some tennis to go have the counselling sort of things. And
so we have a positive coach role model situation in this story.
And it was really nice, even just hearing the words like, we really want you. So
it's just that belonging theme running through this story and a life.
Yeah.
Jess, I was curious about the moment when you had a bunch of hopes and dreams around tennis. You had a lot of ups and downs and challenges. I love in the end how you express no regret, that you've learned a ton. You've become an incredibly resilient person. And I'm just wondering about the moment when you realized that you weren't going to continue pursuing your tennis dreams. What was going on and how did you reach that conclusion?
I think when I was at Rice University, I think deep down, I kind of knew this was going to be it. So the final year, I wasn't playing on the team. I wasn't traveling with the team. So it all started there. The binging started again. So really, I think deep down then, I really knew, oh gosh, this is the final year and what am I going to do when I get back home? And knowing that tennis wasn't going to be a big part of my life, I knew that deep down. It was really, really, really difficult. It was sort of forced upon me, really, in terms of, in the end, my dad sat me down one morning when I came home and I was really struggling. And he said, you've got to give this recovery a go. And so it was really then, I was really lost and depressed and everything. So that was the turning point of really starting the recovery. Part of me saying the story, I was a little bit worried of like, I don't want it to sound like I always hated tennis or that was the reason I had an eating. It really wasn't. It was actually the thing that got me going. I really had low self-esteem in a lot of areas. I'm really quite a perfectionist. And it kind of was the thing of, well, okay, I'm good at this. Even like in my social life, it's like, okay, I can say I'm the tennis player. This is what I do. And also I just absolutely loved moving and always just craved that, every day. I just was like looking forward to the training aspect of it. I think for me, where I stopped enjoying it so much was when, I don't know if it was the pressure I put on myself or it was the pressure I felt from the LTA and things, probably both, but really actually playing it. And I mean, that's why I play it now and I love it so much now, is really for those reasons, for just actually not thinking, being totally in my body and in this flow and in this state where I really struggle to get it anywhere else in my life.
So, Jess, how have you taken everything you learned from your own experience, your own story, and applied it to your work and your life now?
When I first got into recovery, I needed that to get clarity about, okay, what's my next step? I had a psychology degree and I also studied pre-medicine at Rice. So I kind of, in my head, I was thinking, well, I'll go to medical school. And so that's what I was, sitting the exams at home. I failed the exam by 1 mark. And at that point, I was just like, I could have done it again, but I was like, I just don't think this is for me. And as I started to really connect with what I really wanted to do, I thought, well, actually, I would love to work in eating disorders and help others. So that really took me on the next step of my path, which was going to London to do a master's in eating disorders and nutrition.
Do you remember how you made the connection about your sense of purpose and what you really wanted to do? I think that's like an incredible thing to be able to do in life. I'm just wondering how you did it. How did you figure it out?
I think it was a lot of being at home and talking to my parents. And also I remember specifically talking with my eldest brother, Dan. So he was like, well, what could bring you joy? And I did think around, actually I've always been interested about nutrition and loved how the effect on the body and my experience of actually starting to feel better. That was it. It was really having those conversations and realizing, okay, well, let's just follow this. Let's find somewhere where I can start to have that education to then help others.
And Jess, I'm getting the picture of a really special and supportive family. Mm-hmm. And I'm remembering on the night that you told the story, like I remember you being pretty surrounded by family and friends, but it sounds like they really show up.
Yeah, got emotional again. But they really, it's funny because especially as with being a tennis player growing up, I had to be independent very quickly. And I never really thought how close I am with my family and how amazing they are. It's funny, the things that really, really light me up is when we're all together. I think the happiest times is really when I'm with them. And I want to say thank you for inviting me to do my story and everything, because actually I really have had a lot of realizations around that. Because deep down, obviously, I love my family so much, but actually really really realizing, gosh, like I'm so happy when we're all together. And actually those moments are precious. And something actually I didn't mention, but when I did come home from university, it was when my mum and dad were splitting up as well.
Oh.
So it was a big part of everything. And obviously, you know, that was the best for them, but it was still very hard, and seeing them struggle in that way too.
Sure. So developing your story, shaping it to share, let you have some insights that you might not have realized.
Yeah, I've really learned so much from doing this. Things like my values, what are really truly my values, because life can get very busy, can't it? And sometimes it can sort of not see family for a long time and things. And actually that's sort of a realization I've had, is that I want to definitely bring that back in as much as I can and schedule it in.
So the other thing that happened on the night that you told your story is that, do you remember this? I think it was an American woman came up to you. She had like almost the same story.
Yes. She came straight away and said, wow, it was like you were telling my story. She went to American university as well, struggled with an eating disorder. She works in fertility as well. So that's something else I work in. And
wasn't she also an athlete?
Yes, a tennis player.
Yeah.
That was the whole thing. Sorry, yes, I did miss that bit out. But she was a tennis player that went to, I can't remember which American uni, but yeah, it was very, very similar. So
it amazes me how these coincidences happen, where the right people hear these stories.
Yeah, I had a few people come up actually and said, thank you for sharing. I related so much to it. You know, it's amazing actually being vulnerable and sharing how it helps others to talk about it as well. And
even if all they do is just feel understood
Yeah.
or feel connected, even if they don't take any action,
Yeah.
it's still a lovely thing. So even someone just listening to your story today who doesn't ever connect with you personally would still get that benefit of feeling less isolated, which is another thing that I love about these stories.
And actually, it was really special having my family there, and just nice to connect with them in that way, in that open way. Because I think, you know, obviously we don't really talk about that openly. You know, it's very hard to. And it was even a way to connect together with my family in a very different way.
Absolutely. So Jess, you have an amazing mindset now. Like it's really a superpower that you have, the way you look at this experience and the way you're looking at life now. And it sounds like you're really helping people around nutrition and fertility in particular.
Yeah, that's right. So I have PCOS, and it's an endocrine disorder of the body, and it basically affects the hormones, and you can cause things like insulin resistance, where, you know, you kind of don't deal with sugars so well. And there's quite a link with having a harder chance to have babies and things. So it was always a big thing. You know, I was told when I was younger that I might not be able to have children, and I was too young to even think about, I don't even know if I wanted a family, but it was always in the back of my mind. And especially since having our girl, I realized I have a real passion to help women as well with their health and the hormone health, and infertility is quite a big thing right now. So it's something that I really am passionate about helping women with as well.
Oh, fantastic. And I know you do this as a practice.
Yeah.
And we'll make sure to share that information in the show notes. So if anyone listening is intrigued by the support and the services you offer, they can find you. So Jess, thank you so much for sharing your story and telling us more about the backstory and what you're up to now. It's been really such a pleasure. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks for listening. For more information about today's storyteller and conversation, check out the show notes. The True Story London podcast is hosted by me, Michelle Toth. Our producer is Ellis, Ballard. Our theme music is by Sea Noise. Live recordings were provided by Laughing Around and recorded at 21 Soho. More information about our live shows and workshops can be found at truestorylondon.com. And just one more thing. If you haven't already, please subscribe or follow and rate us on your favorite podcast platform. It really does help us to reach more people. Thanks, and we'll see you for another episode soon.